Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I wanted to do a quick rundown of the status of my shop and how I'm keeping it warm this winter with this 5,000 watt heater. In Kansas, and this is a couple nights ago, it was -6. It's currently 3 degrees outside with snow on the ground. So just a quick recap, I've got a 30 by 48 foot shop with a 18 by 12 foot door on the gable end. I've got 3 sliding windows, 1-man door. My garage door has single pane windows in it, which is probably a bad choice thermal wise, but it was single pane windows is like basically the only thing you can get in your garage door windows, but I like being able to see out, so that's a choice that I made. I also have a bathroom in here, and this is the first winter that I've had live plumbing in the shop, so I have to keep it. So this is my 5,000 watt Amazon heater, which I'll have a link to everything down below. It is keeping the shop warm through all of this weather, and I don't think this is as much a testament to this specific heater as it is to the insulation that I put within my shop. I did install under slab insulation and all of the tubes for radiant heat. So there's 2-inch XPS styrofoam underneath with the radiant tubes, which I never installed a boiler. I just installed the tubes and the 2 manifolds, and I wanted to wait and do a couple proof of concepts before I decided whether I wanted to drop money on a boiler and pumps and all of the things that go with that. One additional thing to think about on heaters in the shop in the winter, and it's something that I wish I would have thought of or knew before I built my shop. One of the worst things about working in an unheated shop or an on-demand heated shop, let's say you have one of those 110,000 BTU diesel heaters, which I have one sitting over there, it's just a backup now, is if you come out in your shop and it's freezing cold or it's really cold, let's say you keep it at 45, and then you expect to come out in your shop and turn it up, you will be like, oh, my feet are so cold. I don't even like working out here because my feet are so cold. I want radiant heat, blah, blah, blah. I don't like it. I want radiant heat. Well, I installed the radiant heat piping when I built the shop thinking about that. But now that I have the shop closed and insulated and I have that thing going all the time and I keep that at 60, it's not 60 everywhere, it's 60 up here. If I got my thing, and my desk is 52 degrees and the floor is 50 degrees. But a 50-degree floor when it's 3 degrees outside is great. I have 0 complaints. I just wanted to note that one of the things you don't think about when you're like, oh my God, I want radiant heat, you're probably using on-demand heating in an uninsulated shop, or used to doing that. Let's say the attached garage on your house is always really cold, so you turn on a heater, but then when you lay on the floor, it's really cold. Well, here's the thought. When the whole room is between 50 and 60 degrees, guess what? The floor is that temperature too. So you might not need radiant heat in your shop if you don't want to go through the extra hassle, or you couldn't do it yourself like me. I spent an entire week on my hands and knees stapling pieces of tube down to my 2-inch foam. If I had a plumber do that, I've heard some numbers thrown out. There was like $8 a square foot. They would have like bankrupted me. I would have never been able to do it. But I did it myself. A lot of people can't do it themselves. So one thought is, maybe you don't need a full radiant floor. Maybe all you need is the 2-inch XPS foam underneath your slab and at the edges to insulate your slab from the rest of the ground, and then just keep the shop warm, and then you don't even need radiant heat. Something to think about. The walls have R19 in them, and the ceiling has R60. It's got like 20 inches of blown in fiberglass insulation. So I went a little bit overkill on the insulation in hopes that my utility bills would be lower in the long run. So this winter, this is the coldest winter in memory. We set a record, I think it was -7. It was the coldest since it had been in like the 70s a couple days ago. And this little heater I have had set on 60 degrees. I actually dropped it down to 58 degrees because I felt bad about my power bill. But it probably hasn't turned off in a couple of days. But usually it runs, 15 minutes and then cycles off when it's, let's say, a nice balmy 30 degrees outside. But with this -7 weather type stuff, it's just been running. Let's be real. There are two things that I don't like about this specific heater, and one of them you can hear right now in the background. The fan's kind of loud. I wish it was a little bit quieter and ran slower, spun slower, but it's okay. It's reasonable. I'd like it a lot better if it was quieter. And the second thing I don't like about it is it's a feature and a drawback. It has a digital control panel, which is cool because you can set a temperature with a remote and turn it up and down. I turn it up from my desk right here. I turn it up and down and it works great until the power flashes. When the power flashes on these new screen digital controlled models, they don't come back on. But if you have the dumb heater models, the ones that just have the dial with the line that gets fatter, they just come right back on because they're dumb and they don't know that they lost power. That's the only thing I don't like about this heater. And I will say that I bought this heater because it was on Amazon and it was cheap. And ultimately, it's not my final heating solution. This is this winter until I can find a good deal on a mini split. I'm probably gonna install a 24,000 BTU mini split, possibly a 36,000 if I can find a good deal on it, but I think a 24,000 would be sufficient. And then I was gonna use this guy as backup or supplementation. Like, let's say I had to open and close the door a lot, and I covered this in my last video. This wouldn't be sufficient if I was opening and closing this every hour. It wouldn't work. It would just let out way too much air. So I did bring my truck in here the other day to get the snow off of it. I let it hang out in here overnight, and then I still kind of park outside. If I know it's gonna snow, I'll pull my truck in, and I'm fine with that. But I don't pull in and out every day. So that's one thing to think about. I think the key to using an undersized heater, and I'm not condoning this or recommending this, this is just me being cheap. I didn't want to drop another $2 grand on a mini split after, well, that's just for the parts. Then I'd have to install it or have it installed. Let's say between $2 and $5 grand, depending on what one you get. This was a couple $100. It wasn't even, it was a drop in the hat. Not a big deal. And then I just wired it into one of my 30 amp welder plugs. It's super easy, not a problem. And honestly, it's been keeping up. So it's an interim solution until I get my mini split, which will have a heat pump for next winter, and that will solve my noise problem. So a mini split would be quieter, it would put out twice as much as this thing does, heat-wise, and everything would be hunky-dory. But I don't want to drop $2 grand on that right now. So I've got this little guy right here, and I've been running it non-stop all winter, and it's really done a great job. The key is, I don't open the door a lot, and I keep it at a temperature, like I said, I had it on 60, I turned it back to 58 because it wasn't quite keeping up, but it's warm in here. And especially like 60 degrees, once you start working, everything's good, maybe even a little bit too warm. So that's a quick review I wanted to do about my 5,000 watt heater. I could say a lot more, but I think I'm gonna call that good for now. So hope that helps you when you're planning out your shop, and you go out in the shop and work on something.